Good morning, baseball fans, and happy Memorial Day. Big Al here on this Monday, May 25th, 2026, and welcome back to another look at the updated Major League Baseball standings and playoff picture through May 24th. Alright, so let's waste no time and jump right in. And we'll begin in the American League East, which is led by the Tampa Bay Rays, now owners of the best record in Major League Baseball at 34-16. 19-5 at home, 15-11 on the road, 236 runs scored and 196 runs allowed. That's a run differential of plus 40. They lost their last game, but they are 7-3 over their last 10. Alright, this past week was a pretty good week for Tampa. They swept the Baltimore Orioles in St. Petersburg to start the week, outscoring Baltimore 25-10. And then split two with the New York Yankees, 1 up and 1 down, where both teams scored 4 runs, and there was one game that was postponed. So for the week, the Rays finished 4-1 with 29 runs scored and 14 runs allowed. This week, they're playing the Orioles again for 3 games down in Baltimore, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they're back home for 3 against the Los Angeles Angels, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In second place, you have the New York Yankees with a record of 31-22. They are 4.5 games behind Tampa. 17-9 at home, 14-13 on the road. 254 runs scored and 187 runs allowed gives them a run differential of plus 67. They won their last game, and they are only 4-6 over their last 10, and this was a so-so week for the Yankees, splitting a 4-game series with the Toronto Blue Jays, 2 games apiece, while being outscored in that set 14-13. And then they split with Tampa Bay, also in the Bronx, with both teams scoring 4 runs. The game on Saturday was postponed. So the Yankees finished the week 3-3 with 17 runs scored and 18 runs allowed. This week, the Yankees are on the road, starting off with 3 in Kansas City against the Royals Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then 3 out in Sacramento with the A's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In third place, you have the Toronto Blue Jays at 25-28, 10.5 games behind the Rays. 15-12 at home, 10-16 on the road. 214 runs scored, 220 runs allowed. They have a run differential of minus 6. They lost their last game, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. This past week, they split the 4-game set in the Bronx against the New York Yankees, 2 games apiece. Toronto actually outscored New York 14-13. And they won the series at the Rogers Center against the Pittsburgh Pirates, outscoring the Bucks 12-8. They finished the week with a record of 4-3, and that should be 26 runs scored and 21 runs allowed. This week they'll play 3 at home with the Miami Marlins, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then it's off to Camden Yards for a big 4-game series with the division rival Orioles from Thursday through Sunday. The aforementioned Baltimore Orioles are in 4th place. They have a record of 23-30. They are 12.5 games behind the Rays. 14-13 at home and 9-17 on the road. 228 runs scored, 285 runs allowed gives them a run differential of minus 57. They lost their last game, and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, so the Orioles got swept in Tampa Bay against the Rays to start the week. They were outscored in that series 25-10. but they won the series back at Camden Yards against the struggling Detroit Tigers, going 2-1 in that series and outscoring them 13-11. So a 2-4 week for Baltimore, with 23 runs scored and 36 runs allowed. Alright, they get another crack at the Rays, this time in Baltimore for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then they got that big 4-game series at home against the Toronto Blue Jays starting Thursday and running through Sunday. The Boston Red Sox round out the AL East with a record of 22-30. They are 13 games behind Tampa, 8-17 at home, and this is one of their worst home starts in recent memory. And they are 14-13 on the road. 194 runs scored, 210 runs allowed, gives them a run differential of -16. They've lost 3 straight games, and they are 4-6 in their last 10. So it was an up and down week for the Red Sox. They started off with a 3-game sweep against the Royals in Kansas City, outscoring them 14-5. And then coming home and getting swept by the Minnesota Twins, 3-0. And Boston was outscored 13-18. By the way, it's the first time the Boston Red Sox were swept at home by the Minnesota Twins since 1994. So the Red Sox finished the week 3-3 with 27 runs scored and 23 runs allowed. And they've got a tough week ahead of them this week. They start off with 3 with the Atlanta Braves, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then they head to Cleveland for 3 games with the Guardians, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Stardust is in the house. Happy Memorial Day, my friend. Okay, moving on to the American League Central. And the Cleveland Guardians have figured things out. They lead this division with a record of 32-23. 15-10 at home, 17-13 on the road. They've scored 232 runs and allowed 209, giving them a run differential of +23. They won their last game, and they are 8-2 over their last 10. And this was a very good week for Cleveland, going into Detroit and sweeping all 4 games from the struggling Tigers, where they outscored Detroit 18-8. Then they went to Philadelphia over the weekend and took 2 of 3 from the Phillies, with both teams scoring 4 runs. So this was a pitching-heavy series between the Guardians and Phillies. That translates to a 6-1 week for the Cleveland Guardians, where they scored 22 runs and allowed only 12. Alright, the Guardians will be home all this week, starting off with 3 with the Washington Nationals, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and 3 with the Boston Red Sox, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Chicago White Sox sit in second place with a record of 26-26. They are 4.5 games behind Cleveland. 14-10 at home, 12-16 on the road, 235 runs scored, and 252 runs allowed, gives them a run differential of -17. They've lost 2 straight games, and they sit 5-5 over their last 10. And this was kind of a tough West Coast trip for the White Sox this past week, going 1-2 in Seattle and 1-2 in San Francisco, as they finished the week 2-4 with 24 runs scored and 34 runs allowed. Alright, they'll be at home against their division this week, beginning with 4 with the Minnesota Twins Monday through Thursday, and this is basically for second place in the division. And then the Tigers come to town for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, in third place are those Minnesota Twins at 26-27, 5 games behind the Guardians, 15-14 at home, 11-13 on the road. 248 runs scored, 244 runs allowed, That's a run differential of +4. They've won 4 straight games, and they are 7-3 over their last 10. And they had a very good week as well, taking 2 of 3 at home from the Houston Astros, and then sweeping the Red Sox in Boston for the first time since 1994. That gives them a 5-1 record for the week, with 29 runs scored and 19 runs allowed. And Minnesota will be on the road this week. They start off in Chicago with 4 with the White Sox, Monday through Thursday, and then 3 with the Pirates in Pittsburgh, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Kansas City Royals are in 4th place, record of 22-31, 9 games behind the Guardians, 15-14 at home, 7-17 on the road. 207 runs scored, 232 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -25. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 3-7 over their last 10. The week started out poorly for the Royals as they were swept at home by the Boston Red Sox, being outscored 14-5. But they turned it around over the weekend, taking 2 out of 3 from the Seattle Mariners, where they outscored the visitors 13-8. So Kansas City finishes the week 2-4, and they are now 18-22, or 2-4 for the week, and they scored 18 runs and allowed 22. Sorry about that. Alright. Pretty tough week coming up for the Royals. They start off at home with 3 with the New York Yankees Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then it's off to Arlington for 3 with the Texas Rangers, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And sitting in the basement of the AL Central are the Detroit Tigers at 21-33, 10.5 games behind Cleveland, 13-12 at home, 8-21 on the road. 207 runs scored and 232 runs allowed also gives them a run differential of -25. They won their last game, and they are just 2-8 over their last 10. And it was another rough week for A.J. Hinch and the Tigers, getting swept at home by the Cleveland Guardians 4-0, and then losing the series in Baltimore 2-1. That's a 1-6 record for the Tigers, with 19 runs scored and 31 runs allowed. This week, they'll host the Los Angeles Angels for 3 games, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then they head to the south side of Chicago for 3 with the White Sox over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But yeah, the Detroit Tigers, they have just been struggling. They're hitting around 200 as a team. They are 5-17 in the month of May, and they're averaging about 2.5 or 2.6 runs per game during this 18-game stretch in which the Tigers have lost 16 of those games. It's been a rough go for the Tigers, no question about it. Moving on to the American League West, the Athletics are still on top in this division at 27-26. Just 10-12 at home, but 17-14 on the road. 232 runs scored and 239 runs allowed puts them at a -7 run differential. They won their last game, and they are 5-5 over their last 10. Next is a virtual tie for second place with both the Seattle Mariners and the Texas Rangers. Seattle is 25-29, while Texas is 24-28, both sitting 2.5 games behind the A's in the West. Seattle is 14-15 at home, 11-14 on the road, 218 runs scored, 212 runs allowed gives them a run differential of +6. They've lost 2 straight games, and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Meanwhile, Texas is 11-10 at home, 13-18 on the road, 201 runs scored, 195 runs allowed for a run differential of +6. They've lost 3 straight games, and they are also 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, so the A's took 3 of 4 in Anaheim from the Angels before dropping the series at Petco Park against the San Diego Padres 2-1. They finished the week 4-3, 32 runs scored, 26 runs allowed. They'll be at home in West Sacramento all week, beginning with 3 games with the Seattle Mariners, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, followed by 3 tough ones with the New York Yankees, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Mariners this week went 2-1 at home against the White Sox, and then lost the series 2-1 to the Royals in Kansas City. So they finished the week 3-3, scoring 20 runs and allowing 20 runs. This week they play the A's in Sacramento for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they come back home to T-Mobile Park for 3 with the Arizona Diamondbacks, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the Texas Rangers, meanwhile, went 2-1 at Colorado before getting swept in Anaheim by the Angels, 3-0. The Rangers finished the week 2-4 with 30 runs scored and 27 runs allowed. This week they have 4 games at home with the Houston Astros and 3 more at home with the Kansas City Royals. The Astros series runs Monday through Thursday, while the Royals series runs Friday through Sunday. In 4th place, you have the Houston Astros with a record of 23-31. Currently 8 games under 500, but they're only 4.5 games behind the Angels behind the A's for first place. 12-14 at home, 11-17 on the road. 233 runs scored, 281 runs allowed, puts them at a run differential of -48. They've won 3 straight games, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. Alright, the Astros began the week losing the series in Minneapolis against the Twins 2-1, and then going into Wrigley Field and sweeping the Chicago Cubs in 3, as the Astros finished the week 4-2. With 21 runs scored and 18 runs allowed. Alright, they have 4 games in Arlington against the in-state rival Texas Rangers, Monday through Thursday. And then they come back home for 3 against the Milwaukee Brewers, Friday through Sunday. And rounding out the American League West are the Los Angeles Angels, with a record of 20-34. They are 7.5 games behind the A's. 12-16 at home, 8-18 on the road. 217 runs scored versus 279 runs allowed. That's a run differential of -62. They've won 3 straight games, and they are 4-6 in their last 10 games. Alright, they lost the series at home to the Athletics 2-1, but then swept the Texas Rangers over the weekend for a 4-2 week with 31 runs scored and 33 runs allowed. This week they play 3 with the Tigers in Detroit Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they head down to St. Petersburg for 3 games with the Tampa Bay Rays Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's a look at the American League standings. Now let's jump into the National League, beginning in the East with the Atlanta Braves, with a record of 36-18, 17-10 at home, 19-8 on the road, 282 runs scored and 180 runs allowed. That gives them a run differential of +102. They've lost 2 straight, and they are 6-4 in their last 10 games. Alright, the Braves began the week taking 3 out of 4 in Miami against the Marlins, and then coming home and losing the series to the Washington Nationals 2-1. So the Braves closed the week with a 4-3 record with 32 runs scored and 28 runs allowed. Alright, the Braves are hitting the road this week, beginning with 3 at Fenway with the Boston Red Sox Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then 3 in Cincinnati with the Reds Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Washington Nationals are in second place with a record of 27-27, 9 games behind Atlanta, 10-16 at home, 17-11 on the road. 288 runs scored, 302 runs allowed, gives them a run differential of -14. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 6-4 in their last 10. Alright, the Nationals split 4 with the New York Mets when they came to DC early last week. And then they beat the Atlanta Braves in a 3-game set, 2-1, and this was in Atlanta. By the way, that series was in Atlanta. Washington also finished the week at 4-3 with 33 runs scored and 34 runs allowed. Alright, the Nationals will hit the road for 3 games with the Guardians in Cleveland Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then return home for 3 with the San Diego Padres Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Philadelphia Phillies slipped to third place with a record of 26-27, 9.5 games behind the Braves. 14-16 at home, 12-11 on the road. 213 runs scored, 237 runs allowed. That gives them a run differential of -24. They lost their last game, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. And this was a bit of a rough week for the Phillies, losing both series at home against the Ohio teams. They lost 2 of 3 to start the week with the Cincinnati Reds, and then over the weekend dropped 2 of 3 to the Cleveland Guardians. So they went 2-4 against the Ohio teams this week, with 14 runs scored and 21 runs allowed. The Phillies are about to embark on a 6-game West Coast trip, which begins with 3 in San Diego against the Padres Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then over the weekend, 3 games in LA against the Dodgers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In 4th place, you have the Miami Marlins with a record of 25-29. They are 11 games behind Atlanta, 18-15 at home, only 7-14 on the road. 231 runs scored and 242 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -11. They've won 3 straight games, and they are 5-5 over their last 10 games. Okay, the Marlins, of course, lost the 4-game series to the Atlanta Braves 3-1, but then swept the New York Mets 3-0 over the weekend for a 4-3 record with 30 runs scored and 28 runs allowed. Alright, the Marlins are on the road all week, starting off with 3 with the Blue Jays at the Rogers Center in Toronto Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they meet the Mets again, this time in Queens, for 3 games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the aforementioned New York Mets round out the NL East with a record of 22-31, 13.5 games behind the Braves, 11-13 at home, 11-18 on the road. 206 runs scored and 227 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -21. They've lost 3 straight games, and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, the Mets went to DC last week and split the 4-gamer with the Washington Nationals, 2 games apiece, before being swept in Miami 3-0 by the Marlins. In that series, New York was outscored 10-2. So the Mets finished the week at 2-5 with 30 runs scored and 35 runs allowed. The Mets are back home at Citi Field for the week. They have 3 games to start off with the Cincinnati Reds Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they meet the Marlins again for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And these are being played at Citi Field as well. Okay, moving on to the National League Central. We have the Milwaukee Brewers leading the division at 30-20. 16-11 at home, 14-9 on the road. 246 runs scored and 179 runs allowed gives them a run differential of plus 67. They've lost 2 straight games, but they are 7-3 over their last 10. Alright, the Brewers began the week sweeping a 3-game series at Wrigley against the Cubs. And then they came home and dropped the series to the LA Dodgers 2-1 for a 4-2 record with 28 runs scored and 22 runs allowed. Alright, this week the Brewers will host the St. Louis Cardinals for 3 games Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then they go to Houston for 3 games with the Astros Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In second place, you have the St. Louis Cardinals with a record of 29-22, only 1.5 games behind the Brewers. 13-13 at home, a very impressive 16-9 on the road. 233 runs scored and 232 runs allowed. They have a run differential of plus 1. They did lose their last game and they are 5-5 in their last 10 games. Alright, so they lost the series at Busch to the Pittsburgh Pirates 2-1. They split 2 with the Cincinnati Reds, winning 1, losing 1. There were 2 games that were postponed. One was made up as part of a Saturday doubleheader, and then yesterday's finale was rained out as well, and that won't be made up until August. So for the week, the Cardinals finished 2-3 with 25 runs scored and 27 runs allowed. Alright, they're facing the top of the Central this week. 3 at Milwaukee with the Brewers Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then 3 versus the Cubs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And man, what happened to the Northsiders? We're about to find out now. The Chicago Cubs are in 3rd place at 29-24. Now 2.5 games behind Milwaukee in the Central. 18-11 at home, 11-13 on the road. 253 runs scored and 233 runs allowed puts them at a run differential of plus 20. And they are ice cold, losers of 8 straight. And they are 2-8 over their last 10. And this was a very bad week for the Cubs, as they were swept at home by both the Milwaukee Brewers and Houston Astros, finishing the week 0-6 with 20 runs scored and 38 runs allowed. This week, the Cubs are traveling within the NL Central, beginning with 4 games in Pittsburgh against the Pirates, Monday through Thursday, followed by 3 in St. Louis with the Cardinals, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 4th place are the Cincinnati Reds at a record of 27-25. They are 4 games behind Milwaukee, 14-12 at home, 13-13 on the road. 229 runs scored and 263 runs allowed puts them at a run differential of minus 34. They won their last game and they are 5-5 over their last 10. Alright, so this was a pretty good week for the Reds. They won the series with the Phillies in Philadelphia 2-1, and then came home and split with the St. Louis Cardinals again. 2 of the games were postponed. 1 was made up as part of a doubleheader on Saturday, and then Sunday's game was rained out. So only 5 games for the Reds this week, where they posted a 3-2 record, 25 runs scored and 24 runs allowed. Alright, this week they have 3 in Queens against the New York Mets Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they're back home for a 3-game set with the Atlanta Braves Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Rounding out this dogfight of a division in the National League Central is the Pittsburgh Pirates at 27-26. 4.5 games behind the Brewers. 13-13 at home, 14-13 on the road. 256 runs scored and 234 runs allowed puts them at a run differential of plus 22. They won their last game and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, they won the series in St. Louis against the Cardinals to start the week, 2-1. And then they went to Toronto and lost 2 of 3 to the Blue Jays, posting a record of 3-3 for the week with 27 runs scored and 23 runs allowed. Alright, this week the Pirates welcome the Chicago Cubs to Pittsburgh for 4 games, Monday through Thursday. And that's followed up by 3 at home with the Minnesota Twins, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, wrapping things up, the National League West, led by the Los Angeles Dodgers. 33-20 record, 15-10 at home, 18-10 on the road. 274 runs scored and 168 runs allowed. They now have the best run differential in Major League Baseball at plus 106. They've won 2 straight games and they are 8-2 over their last 10. Alright. And this was a pretty big week for the Dodgers as they took 2 of 3 on the road in San Diego and 2 of 3 in Milwaukee as they finished the week 4-2 and they finished that road trip 7-2. This week the Dodgers scored 26 runs while allowing only 14. Alright, the Dodgers are back home in the friendly confines of Chavez Ravine with 3 against the Colorado Rockies Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and 3 with the Philadelphia Phillies Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The San Diego Padres are sitting in second place with a record of 31-21. This puts them 1.5 games behind the Dodgers. 16-13 at home and 15-8 on the road. 211 runs scored and 205 runs allowed puts them at a run differential of plus 6. They lost their last game and they are 6-4 over their last 10. And the Padres had an opportunity slip away as they dropped 2 of 3 to the first place Dodgers, but then followed up by winning the series against the A's 2-1. So San Diego closes the week 3-3, 16 runs scored and 17 runs allowed. This week they have a 3-game homestand with the Philadelphia Phillies Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then it's off to our nation's capital for 3 games with the Washington Nationals Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In third place, you have the Arizona Diamondbacks at 28-24, 4.5 games behind LA. 18-10 at home, 10-14 on the road. 239 runs scored, 232 runs allowed, gives them a run differential of plus 7. They've won 2 straight, and they are 8-2 in their last 10. And this was a really good week for the Arizona Diamondbacks, as they went 6-1 at home this week against the division, including a 3-game sweep of the San Francisco Giants, and that's followed up by winning 3 of 4 from the Colorado Rockies. So again, that's a 6-1 record for the Diamondbacks, with 41 runs scored and 17 runs allowed. And they're hitting the road all week, staying on the West Coast. 3 in San Francisco with the Giants Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, followed by 3 with the Mariners in Seattle. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The aforementioned San Francisco Giants are in 4th place, 22-31, 11 games behind the Dodgers. 12-13 at home, 10-18 on the road. 195 runs scored and 242 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -47. They won 2 straight games and are only 4-6 in their last 10. Alright, so the week started out poorly for the Giants, getting swept in Arizona 3-0 by the Diamondbacks. But then they came home and won 2 of 3 from the Chicago White Sox, finishing the week 2-4. 30 runs scored and 40 runs allowed. This week, they're staying within the division, playing the Diamondbacks again for 3 games, this time at Oracle Park, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they're off to Denver for 3 games with the Rockies, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And speaking of the Colorado Rockies, they round out the National League West with a record of 20-34. 13.5 games behind the Dodgers, and they presently are tied with the LA Angels for the worst record in all of baseball. The Rockies are 10-15 at home and 10-19 on the road. 219 runs scored and 282 runs allowed puts them at a run differential of -63. They've lost 2 straight games, and they are 3-7 over their last 10. And this was a rough week for the Rockies, dropping 2 of 3 at home to the Texas Rangers, and then losing 3 of 4 in Arizona against the D-backs. They finished the week 2-5 with 20 runs scored and 39 runs allowed. And they're staying within the division. They have 3 with the Dodgers in LA Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then it's back home at Coors Field for 3 with the San Francisco Giants Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, now let's wrap this up with a look at the playoff race through May 24th. In the American League, Tampa Bay would have the number 1 seed. Cleveland is number 2, and the A's are number 3. Taking a look at the wild card race, the New York Yankees at 31-22 would be the number 1 wild card. The Chicago White Sox at 26-26 would be the number 2 wild card. And the Minnesota Twins at 26-27 would be the 3rd and final wild card in the American League. Toronto is just 1 game out. Seattle and Texas are both 1.5 games out. Baltimore is 3 games out. Houston and Boston are both 3.5 games out. Kansas City is 4 games out. Detroit falls to 5.5 games out. And the Angels sit 6.5 games behind Minnesota for that last wild card spot. On the National League side of things, Atlanta would have the number 1 seed in the National League, followed by the LA Dodgers with the 2 seed, and the Milwaukee Brewers with the 3 seed. And jumping over to the wild card race as of May 24th, the San Diego Padres would be the number 1 wild card at 31-21. The St. Louis Cardinals at 29-22 would have the number 2 wild card. And the Chicago Cubs at 29-24 would hang on for that 3rd and final wild card spot. Arizona is only a half a game out. Cincinnati is 1.5 games out. Then you have Pittsburgh at 2 games behind. Washington is 2.5 games out. Philadelphia is 3 games out. Miami is 4.5 games out. New York and San Francisco are both 7 games out. And Colorado would bring up the rear. They are 9.5 games behind the Cubs for that last wild card in the National League. Alright, there it is, folks. The Major League Baseball standings through May 24th. Alright, we'll be back again next Monday with another look at the standings. through May 31st. So make sure you join me for that. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week with another look at the Major League Baseball standings. Peace out.